Good morning, football, our friends on the NFL Network. Which teams will be a surprise contender in 2023? Great question. Great question. I think, I'll tell you this right now. A couple teams in my mind, and I'm always looking for future bets. I'm always looking for Super Bowl tickets. I'm always, I've really started doing my work with the NFL as far as trying to get a feel for handicapping some of these teams, kind of looking at win totals, kind of looking at future markets, NFC Championship, AFC Championship, Super Bowl, whatever. This is the time to do it. If you're not working, you're sleeping. A team that has caught my eye is the Seattle Seahawks. I like what the Seahawks have going on, and I'll tell you why. I think the division is weak. I think a lot of people are showing love to the 49ers for no reason. The 49ers have a lot of question marks going in, losing their defensive coordinator, having an injured quarterback, having a quarterback controversy. Obviously, Brock Purdy, we've seen, 8 games of him. If he is the starter, coming off of an injury, you could assume he takes a step back. If he takes a step back, do we see Trey Lance? What does Trey Lance have? If not, Sam Darnold. What does Sam Darnold have? So should they be runaway favorites to win the division? Probably not. I assume the Rams are going to suck. I assume the Cardinals are going to suck. So that leaves the Seahawks, who were pretty good last year, have made some moves, drafted well, have good weapons. Geno Smith seems to have kind of turned a corner. Even if Geno regresses, he could still play at a relatively average to high level. So if you get a sneaky division winner Seahawks in a weak NFC, I like that. The Lions aren't a surprise team because everyone fell in love with the Lions last year, but I think their weapons are good. The Lions could certainly be a team that's a surprise contender. The Saints, everyone knows that I think the Saints have the easiest schedule in the NFL in a weak division, so you could have a 11, 12, 13 win division winning Saints team. Again, battling a weak NFC. It's really the Eagles, and that's it. So who are the Eagles going to play in the NFC Championship game? That's where I'm looking to find value in a sleeper. I don't think you can go get or find a sleeper team in the AFC because the AFC is too loaded. Jacksonville might take a step forward, but are they better? Are they going to end up being better than Cincinnati, Buffalo, Kansas City? Probably not. So if you're looking for a sleeper team, a surprise contender, I think you have to stay in the NFC because all these divisions are up for grabs and the road is much easier.
Team that you would pick to be a surprise contender in 2023 is Peter.
I'm going to say the words of a former quarterback there. Go Hawks. Seattle. The NFC's wide open and Seattle's
unbelievable.
One of these teams that is in the playoffs last year and got significantly better this offseason.
Yeah.
They added talent. They solidified the fact that Geno is their guy. And in the draft, they had 2 first-round picks that I think are going to both play major roles on this team. In Weatherspoon in the corner and then Jackson Smith and Jigba. Look, they got a running back to go with Kenneth Walker. They are loaded. They have 2 guys who were rookie offensive tackles starting every game last week. Now they're second-year guys. They've got more of a feel. We know that Tariq Woolen's having a minor procedure going on now, but he's going to be back, and Jamal Adams is supposed to be healthy. So,
yeah, I mean, roster-wise, weapon-wise, you hate to use, it's very cliche, but they are loaded. I mean, if you told me that Geno Smith is going to be bang average, the 15th best quarterback in the NFL next year, I would say that's certainly good enough for this team to win the division and possibly win some playoff games. Again, guys, you got to look at the rest of the NFC. I mean, let's say they win the division, okay? You're looking at who being their competition. Who is the other teams that are really pushing them? Who else is pushing the Seattle team besides? So you have the Eagles, all right, then who? The Cowboys, the Saints. You're starting to look around, and all those teams are kind of the same as far as I'm concerned. Like, is the Cowboys, who has a better roster, the Cowboys or the Seahawks? Who has a better quarterback, the Cowboys or the Seahawks? That's a fun conversation to have with your buddies right there.
Look, I don't know. You tell me that Seattle's a crazy pick. I look at these playoff odds, Super Bowl odds, and nobody has Seattle in the Super Bowl conversation, but I wouldn't be shocked in a wide-open NFC if we saw Seattle playing in the Super Bowl in Las Vegas in a couple months.
Yeah, Seattle was a surprise team last year. We were like, oh, they're kind of resetting, and then they took off. I'm going with another team Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah,
Duval,
see.
this was a team that had the first overall picked Trayvon Walker, but then still ended up in the playoffs, which seems to be unheard of. Trevor Lawrence took off last year from year 1 to year 2, finished the season extremely strong under Doug Peterson. This is a team that's getting Calvin Ridley coming off a
And I think they are talking about two different things. Like, I'm looking at this as far as like value, as far as like making a bet on a future, that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think they're looking at it like that. My issue with taking Jacksonville is exactly what I just said. What does that mean that they're going to be a surprise contender? Because them taking a step forward, did they take enough of a step forward to realistically be in the conversation with the top part of the AFC? I don't know about that. So if that's not the case, can they actually be a contender? I would argue no. They can be really good. I know I'm going to get chewed up by Jacksonville fans in the comments. I think Jacksonville is good. I like Jacksonville. I would be buying stock in Jacksonville. But to contend, to actually be in the same conversation as the top of the AFC, I don't think they're there yet. And if that's the case, I don't think they can be an answer here.
suspension, Evan Ingram returned, and then now everybody knows and has their expectations for Doug Peterson. On top of that, during the division where the other teams are kind of hitting reset, Texans draft C.J. Stroud. Obviously, the Colts get Anthony Richardson. Titans draft Will Levis, but they're still figuring out with a new GM and Rand Carthon. This kind of makes the path possibly a little bit easier for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and we saw them go toe-to-toe with the Kansas City Chiefs last year in the playoffs. So I think the Jazz can surprise a few teams next year.
The path is easier because the division is terrible. They're kind of in the same situation as the Saints. The problem is once they get out of that division, that's the issue. The issue for the Saints, why I keep talking about the NFC, the Saints have an easy path because of the division. And then when they get in the playoffs, you're talking about, the Vikings, you're talking about teams like that where they're not that great. On the flip side, when Jacksonville gets out of the division, you're talking about the Ravens, the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Bills. These teams, even the middle teams of the AFC are good, like the Dolphins. The Dolphins probably could win the NFC. So that's the path only goes so far.
Yes, and I know.
We reviewed a video from them last week, and Gerald McCoy, we kind of negatively reviewed his performance in that video. If he says the Buccaneers right here, I'm going to be pissed. If he says the Buccaneers here, there's no reason he should be on the show.
I'll be a little biased.
Yeah, but
This has kind of been my tag all week, being a little biased, but I'm going to go with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Okay.
The reason I'm
Okay. I honestly, my heart started pounding when he said, let me be a little biased here. I don't think the Raiders, I don't see it. I mean, if you're looking at the Raiders, loaded division, really hard for them to come out of that division. They're probably the worst team in the division, if you ask me. You got McDaniels, who seemingly cannot succeed. That was a wild sentence. Seemingly cannot succeed as a head coach. You've got Jimmy G, who had foot surgery a couple weeks ago. Unknown, no idea how Jimmy G is going to be. I just don't see the Raiders contending for what? Contending for the division? That would be a shock. If they were contending to win the division, beat out the Chiefs, beat out the Chargers, even beat out the Broncos. But then to contend in the AFC, think about how good Jimmy G would have to be for the Raiders to be a legitimate threat in the AFC. And then you think about, wow, it's kind of hard to imagine Jimmy G being that good. But then it's kind of hard to imagine him playing 17 games.
I'm going with the Las Vegas Raiders is because you have McDaniels, who's already been there, and then they brought in who? Jimmy G. And the last time we seen them two together, Tom was out and Jimmy G, what was his record?
3-0, I think.
3-0. He went in, he won. These guys know each other, and Jimmy G is more than a game manager. I know everybody thinks he's a game manager, but with the style offense that they play, Jimmy G is a perfect fit. They have Devontae Adams, they got Hunter Renfrow, and he is great at the across the middle, the play action. They have Josh Jacobs, who led the league in rushing. They bring in Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. I know he played on the edge, but with the way they can mix and match, Max Crosby, I talked about him yesterday. They still have Chandler Jones.
I think it's funny whenever analysts do this. Whenever analysts like just name the team, when they're like, oh, you know, they got Josh Jacobs, they got Hunter Renfrow, they have Devontae Adams, they have Josh McDaniels, they have these players, they have Max Crosby. Well, they had all those players last year and they were terrible. And they had Derek Carr, who, even if he's not better than Jimmy G, which I think he is, he's not worse than Jimmy G. He's like the same as Jimmy G. So is Jimmy G and McDaniels 3-game sample size relationship, is it that much to take the Raiders from being terrible last year to contending in the AFC, the loaded AFC? That seems like a lot. I mean, Tyree Wilson will have to be real good because, again, he just named a bunch of players that were already there. You know, Devontae Adams, trust me, if you go back and look at the comments from a couple of videos ago, everyone let me know. Devontae Adams had 1,500 yards last year. So Josh Jacobs led the NFL in rushing. Seemingly, they had pretty good individual performances, and yet the team was ass. So I don't know if this one flies.
You bring in Tyree Wilson in the middle. He's more of a hybrid where you need a guy that can push up the middle. You can mix and match in the pass rush. I believe the Las Vegas Raiders have a real shot of winning it all.
Winning it all. I love
Whoa.
it.
Yes.
That is
I don't
crazy.
know about winning it all, but what about a surprise team in the Falcons?
I've shown a lot of love for the Falcons. Recently. I think the Falcons do have a good roster. They're building a good roster. Again, I think a weak division. So the Falcons could, if the Falcons surprise teams, if the Falcons are good enough to win the division, yeah, I mean, they could, they're not going to compete for the NFC, but they could be a surprise team, like a surprise division winner. I mean, it's hard, you know, I mean, obviously I'm a Saints fan, but if you take away the Seahawks, who I already talked about, I like in the NFC as a surprise division winner, the Falcons might be my second choice as like a surprise winner because I think the roster is talented. And if those young players take a step forward, yeah, I mean, I can see it. Like if Desmond Ridder takes a step forward, if Bijan Robinson is as good as advertised, you know, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, like there's stuff there. You know, there's stuff there too with a young nucleus. If that young nucleus kind of gels and becomes something, and there's no reason to say that they can't compete for the division. Now they could, you know, that's asking a lot of players, no doubt. But I don't hate this pick at all. They're certainly not going to contend for a Super Bowl. They're certainly not going to contend for the NFC South or the NFC Championship. But they could contend for the NFC South.
We had Desmond Ridder on this week. Look, so many people respect Arthur Smith, and you felt like he was going to get this thing turned around in Atlanta. He has doubled down on Desmond Ridder and said he's his guy. They didn't go out in the draft. They didn't want to look at free agency. And now you've surrounded him with all sorts of weapons. You got Bijan Robinson. They've got a running back room that could maybe rival anybody in the league. They had the third most rushing yards last season, and now you add Bijan. You've got Algier. You've got CP. You've got Drake London. On defense, they add Jesse Bates. It's a Falcons team that has never hosted a playoff game in Mercedes-Benz Stadium since they opened that thing. And it's time for them to get the magic back there in Atlanta. And I just feel like they've been sort of on the cusp of maybe getting this thing turned around.
Certainly
I think a lot of
radar.
people they're certainly off the radar. And I think people would like to see that for Arthur Smith. So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that at all. I mean, I really don't. Let me know in the comments below, who do you think could be a surprise contender in 2023 this season? I mean, again, I think the way you look at it is who has the easiest path, who has the biggest upside. You know, what teams where if blank player takes a step forward, can that team all of a sudden be something? Kind of again, not to talk about the Seahawks, but a player like Geno or Jared Goff in Detroit, players like that who have another gear, I suppose, and you surround them with weapons, new coaching, new location, new whatever. If those players take a step forward, they can really drag a franchise from the bottom to the middle or to the top. So I think that's what you got to look at, kind of the opposite of like the Buccaneers, where you can see them kind of trending down. You know, you see the Bucs trending where players have probably peaked and now in their career are kind of falling back. So I would offer that advice as far as you picking your teams. I will say for me, I'll go Seahawks. We'll do one. Do one in the comments below. I don't want people listing 7 or 8 surprise contenders. Do one contender from the AFC, one contender from the NFC. Let me know in the comments below what you think. I can't wait to read them. I will be replying to all of them. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next video.